Thank you very much, Dietmar. Now for the next presentation, I would like to welcome Ben Wizner, the Director of Speech Privacy and Technology Project at the American Civil Liberties Union. For more than 15 years, he has worked on the intersection of human rights and national security, litigating numerous cases involving airport security practices, government watch lists, surveillance practice, targeted killing, and torture. So we will be careful. Yeah. Since July of 2013, he's been the principal legal advisor to Edward Snowden, and let's welcome Ben on stage.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be included in this very important conversation, and I've learned a great deal already from the speakers this morning. Fake news is a term that I had never heard before the end of 2016, and now it seems that we can't escape it. As many have noted, many of the current discussions around fake news arose in response to the shock of the British Brexit vote, and even more particularly, the election of Donald Trump, an outcome that was so unexpected and so unacceptable to so many that it demanded an explanation outside of simple politics. To many Americans, and I might include myself among them, President Trump could only be the result of malign outside forces, not the perverse culmination of our own homegrown pathologies, what the late Philip Roth called the indigenous American berserk. In the aftermath of Trump's victory, people were casting about. Some placed their hopes in an audit of electronic voting machines that might prove that the machines in key states had been hacked and their outcomes manipulated, but that fantasy was short-lived, and it was soon replaced by a far more enduring narrative, that the proliferation of fraudulent news, including foreign propaganda disguised as domestic journalism and spread over social media platforms, was a primary cause of Donald Trump's election. And in the weeks right after the election, everywhere I spoke, the first question was, what are we going to do to solve this problem of fake news? Now, almost immediately, Trump himself co-opted the term to apply to any news coverage that is unfavorable of him, even the most rigorously fact-based coverage. And at the same time, he has continued to be one of the world's most prolific purveyors of untruth. He insisted that millions of votes for Hillary Rodham Clinton were cast illegally, that record crowds attended his inauguration. More recently, he has insisted that the FBI sent spies to infiltrate his campaign and to prevent his election. And this week, that Democrats and not his own administration are responsible for the forced separation of immigrant children from their parents at US borders. That the world's most prominent Democratic leader is also its most shameless liar points to the difficulty of any government regulatory response to the problem of fraudulent speech. In the United States, Donald Trump and his party control the government. Would we want the Trump administration to be the arbiter of truth and falsity? Is there even a plausible scenario in which handing such authority to the government would not make things much worse? But I think demands to solve the problem of fake news suffer from a more fundamental flaw, and that is our collective tendency to begin debating solutions before we have a common understanding of the problem. As we've already heard today, fake news is in fact many problems, including propaganda injected into our open societies by hostile states, what some have called the filter bubble, that is the increasing tendency of like-minded people to cluster amongst themselves, which has been exacerbated by online platforms like Google and Facebook that curate individualized content on the basis of interest, not social value or importance. The late United States Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan famously said, "Everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts." On today's polarized communications platforms, as we've just heard, people are increasingly demanding and receiving their own facts. Now, I think related to this phenomenon, over the last decades, we've seen diminishing respect for the authority of traditional news organizations and other institutions. And finally, as I mentioned, in the US, we have a president who has taken the art of political dishonesty to unprecedented levels. What's clear is that social media did not create all of these problems, though it has accelerated them. So fixes to social media platforms won't address all of our concerns. I want to make a few short points this morning about the difficulty of addressing the problem of fake news at the policy level. First, as we've seen, the term fake news has become hopelessly politicized. We'll never have a national, much less global consensus about what it is. And that means that any government-imposed regulations will be arbitrary at best and deliberately biased at worst, and will almost certainly increase the polarization that we're hoping to reduce. In fact, I think it's worth considering whether fake news might be more of a reflection of our polarization than a cause of it. What I mean by that is that it's not at all clear that most news consumers particularly care very much about the truth or falsity on their social media news feeds. They've already made up their minds about what's true, and they are eager to see more of it. I think, for example, many of the millions of people who eagerly embraced the claim that Barack Obama was a Kenyan-born Muslim didn't care at all whether the story was true or false. They were participating in a project of delegitimization, and this birther narrative resonated with what they felt to be a deeper truth about Obama. And similarly, many of the people in my own social media feeds who eagerly spread the latest internet rumors about the Trump-Russia investigation without waiting for confirmation from established news sources don't, I think, care very much about those details. They've already decided that Trump is an illegitimate Russian stooge. In other words, people love fake news. It's very tempting to blame 100 professional trolls sitting in an office in St. Petersburg for polluting American minds. But I think at most, they added a few spoonfuls of garbage to a blazing dumpster fire. Which brings me to my next point. Even if we could agree on a workable definition of fake news, it would be impossible to enforce it at scale when billions of people around the world get their news from social platforms. Now, in recent testimony before the US Congress, Mark Zuckerberg was pressed about Facebook's inability to prevent fraudulent news from proliferating. His answer was AI, that is, artificial intelligence, would soon be more effectively deployed to address this problem. Now, on the one hand, this is a recognition that the volume of content uploaded to Facebook every day vastly outweighs the capacity for any human review. So some kind of automation is going to be necessary to enforce rules about propaganda or other unwelcome speech. But how much should we trust computers to do what humans can't? If we connect 2.3 billion people on a single platform and allow them to upload unlimited amounts of content, no system of review can keep pace. While automation might be useful in identifying bots and certain repeat offenders, the most motivated purveyors of fraudulent news will be adept at circumventing automated systems of review. Facebook was recently criticized for encouraging users to upload nude images of themselves as a defense against so-called revenge porn, the reprehensible practice in which people publish intimate photos of their former partners without consent. The idea was that Facebook would be able to assign digital fingerprints to each photo and thereby be able to block other users from posting them, which raises the age-old question, whom do you trust less? Your resentful ex-boyfriend or Facebook? Now, ironically, limiting the spread of intimate photos is one context in which automated review might actually be pretty effective, provided we could trust Facebook or anyone else to securely store that material. Ask yourself, would you trust Facebook with your intimate images? Which brings me to my next point. We should be wary of placing too much trust in corporations like Google and Facebook to moderate the world's content. While these companies espouse corporate values that place high importance on serving the public, we shouldn't forget what their principal allegiance is, which is to their own profits. In fact, in the context of Google and Facebook, we aren't even their real customers. We're the product that they market to their paying customers. So we can't expect them to act primarily in the public interest. This is not an argument against any remedial actions by online platforms. Facebook and other companies can do a lot of things better. They can deprioritize known bad actors. They can target bots. They can require additional disclosures for political ads. And they should probably try to prevent the spread of the most incendiary, violent conspiracy theories, especially in countries with less developed media ecosystems like Myanmar. But they should not act as the world's censors of controversial content. If they do, I think they're likely to spark a backlash by the very partisan consumers of this content who will view this moderation as an attack on their ideology. Ironically, that kind of regulation might make the problem worse and not better. So where does all of this leave us? Not in a very happy place. On the one hand, exposure to lies and propaganda has always been part of the messiness that we accept as part of the price of living in free and open societies. But there's no denying, as we just heard, that the predominant business model of online platforms, which rewards bad behavior, has made this problem worse. And what's genuinely new is the increasing dominance of two advertising companies, Facebook and Google, as choke points through which much of the world's news and information flow. So if we're serious about addressing the harms from the constellation of problems that we call fake news, we'll have to be serious about reducing the dominance of these platform monopolies. That will mean embracing a form of antitrust regulation that, at least in the United States, we have not seen in a generation. Given the enormous power that these companies already possess, doing so will be a heavy political challenge, but I think it's a challenge that we can't afford not to take on. Thank you very much.